Hey guys, welcome back. Andrew here with Ambient Endeavors, and today we're hitting on a topic that I just haven't really covered much on this channel thus far. As some of you might know, about 9 months or so ago, I moved from a home studio that was in the basement of my house into this studio room you've seen here. And one of the things that has allowed me to do is really utilize the space and just kind of the environment to be able to mic up some amplifiers, track acoustic guitar, and just kind of have a more conducive space for some of that live sound type recording. And it's been really fun. I've been a huge fan of guitar amps for a long time for a number of reasons, and I still hold that some of the best guitar tones that I can produce and capture come from a mic or two in front of a good guitar amp. And so I'm really excited to shoot this video and just kind of talk about the foundations of the approach I take to miking both electric guitar amps as well as acoustic guitar. And I hope that it can just be a really great starting point for this conversation and this topic. I'm still kind of learning my way around the engineering side of this studio workflow here, and so as I kind of get up to speed with that and learn some new tricks and kind of develop that ear and comfort level, I hope to kind of continue on in this series and talk about some more specifics and more nuances and details about miking and mic placement and usage. But today we're just going to focus in on kind of the basics of miking up an electric guitar cab as well as an acoustic guitar for the purposes of creating great sounds and tones. The folks at Warm Audio were kind enough to send over a couple of their newer mic offerings earlier this summer. I've been putting them to good use on both electric and acoustic guitars for videos and projects over this summer, and I'm excited to just kind of focus in on the pair here and talk about how they've become sort of my go-tos in terms of microphones for my guitar workflows. So we're going to start by briefly talking about both microphones and some of the attributes and specs of each of them. Then the back half of the video is going to be broken up into two sections where we go through some sound samples on first electric guitar and then acoustic guitar, and just kind of start to get a feel for the sounds that you can get in both of those contexts from each of these microphones. Big thanks to Warm Audio for sending over these microphones to check out and to use in the studio here. They've been a big support of the channel thus far, and I appreciate that. I want to mention though that I'm not getting paid to do this video, and there's no talking points or kind of sales pitches at the end of it. For me, since these have come in, they have been my go-to microphones, and I've found them to be a really great sounding and pretty easy to kind of use and engineer for the contexts and the purposes I use them in, and so I've been really happy with them. Now I know there's a huge landscape of different mic options out there, and so I think these are great options at competitive price points for what they are, but I encourage you to just kind of listen with your ears, and as you hone in on the sounds and the applications you're wanting to use microphones for, do some research or circle back with me on Instagram or here and ask some questions about perhaps where you might go to find those sounds and capture them in the way you want. The first mic we're going to talk about is the Warm WA-19. It is essentially a recreation of the vintage AKG D19 microphone. It's a pretty streamlined, dynamic microphone with some interesting design elements that kind of help achieve its sound. It has a cardioid pattern, which essentially means if you kind of envision a bulb around the front of the microphone, that's where it's going to capture the sound the best. And then that, along with these interesting kind of air slits along the side of the microphone, these help to reduce the proximity effect as you get closer to your source. It helps to kind of keep it from getting too boomy. And then the other cool design element of this WA-19 is this dial here that is essentially a variable high-pass filter at 50 hertz. You can filter out up to 10 dB of that low end to just kind of, again, reduce some of the boominess and give it a little more clear sound, a little bit more kind of punchy presence there. It's a microphone you can use on a lot of different applications, but I've really found it to sound pretty great on both electric and acoustic guitar. It can handle electric guitar cabs with SPL limits of around 145 or so. And so we'll hear that in action in a second here, paired with the next mic I'm going to talk about, which is the Fen-Tone Ribbon mic. It's a classic pencil style ribbon mic design. The nature of a ribbon mic tends to lean a little bit warmer, while also still retaining that sparkle and top end presence, a pretty full balanced sound. And the Fen-Tone here is kind of designed around some of the classic ribbon mics of the 50s and some of the more modernized pencil ribbon mics of the 2000s. The design to me kind of feels like it's paying homage to sort of a retro version of the 121, and I think a lot of the tones kind of confirm that it's at least in the ballpark of something like that 121. It too has a pretty high SPL rating of 148, so you can throw guitar cabs at it. You can use it for acoustic instruments or overheads, any sort of application like that. These are pretty versatile mics themselves. And the Fen-Tone features a Cinemag transformer along with two different modes that you can select with a toggle here, one being a vintage mode and then the other engaging this inline 26 dB preamp boost in the mic signal. And so you get a hotter, more powerful signal hitting your DAW or your preamp. And again, I think overall this mic has sounded really fantastic on guitar cabs from all the work that I've done with it so far. Okay, before we go any further, I want to talk a little bit about mic placement. And this can obviously change based on the speaker cab or amp you're using, the sounds you're going for, but this is kind of a home base for me when I'm miking up a cab. I like to start with the mic an inch or two off the grill to just add a little bit of air and space between there. And then a good starting point for me has been about halfway between the cone and the edge of the speaker, just to give a little bit more warmth, to kind of cut down a little bit on the harshness at times from certain amps. And from there, you can move around and experiment with different placings, different spots on the speaker that sound sweeter or warmer or brighter, and again, kind of find your placement to taste. I've got both the Fen-Tone and the WA-19 at roughly the same points in their respective speakers, and I found it's a really nice kind of balance with those two mics. We're going to take some time now to just hear both mics in action, capturing this hand-wired Vox AC30 behind me here, and you'll get a chance to hear both of them in tandem along with each of them individually, and I'll highlight that visually in the video when it's happening. We're playing a Gretsch Professional Tennessean, and I'm using a little bit of delay from a Strymon Brigadier for the guitar tones. Let's check it out. So let's switch gears now and talk about these mics on acoustic guitar. And we'll start with how I like to place my mic as sort of a starting point again for tracking acoustic guitar. I generally like to keep it right around the 12th fret of the acoustic and somewhere between 6 to 12 inches off of the guitar. It gives a nice close feel while still giving it a little bit of air. It generally tends to highlight some of the brightness and presence of the guitar as opposed to sort of a body or a room mic. And I just like the way that works generally because I'm using these tracks for a fuller mix. and it's nice to kind of have a simple, straightforward, clear and articulate guitar track for those applications. I've actually been using the WA-19 a fair amount for rhythm acoustic tracks in those settings. As you'll hear in the sound samples, the mic does kind of lean brighter, more focused and more present in the top end. I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a full warm sound, but the advantage of that for me is that it helps slot those acoustic guitar tracks into a mix in sort of the frequency ranges that they want to sit. A lot of times when I'm recording acoustic for a mix, I end up carving out a lot of the low end and doing some kind of EQing to really just bring out some of that presence and that top end timbre. And this mic kind of gets you further along in that journey right from the source. The other thing that's great about it, like I mentioned, is you have this high pass filter dial around the top part of the mic here. Again, you can dial that into taste, and it gives a high pass filter at 50 hertz to kind of help tighten up and round off the bottom end of this microphone. So we're going to demonstrate it now here on the Guild OM320, first with the mic in its default setting, and then with that high pass filter fully engaged to its maximum to kind of give the most low end cut to it and bring out some more of that presence and top end. I'm running both of these mics through a warm WA-273 mic preamp behind me here before it hits my DAW. Let's check it out. The Fen-Tone, in contrast, is a much warmer and kind of richer microphone than the WA-19, so it really does provide a nice kind of contrast to that mic, especially on acoustic guitar here. The ribbon attribute just kind of brings out some more of that low and low mid to kind of warm up the source a little bit without losing the presence. I really like that about ribbon mics, as a good ribbon mic can really capture this full range of sounds and kind of provide a sweetness to the tonality of the recording. I think you'll notice here in a minute as you listen to the sounds of the Fen-Tone, you'll notice just a wider, kind of fuller, richer sound than you get with the WA-19, and that can be really important or useful for different contexts on acoustic. I would envision using this type of mic for a track where the acoustic is kind of more prominent or forefront, where you really kind of want that character and tonality of the guitar to stand out in the mix. For this section, we are now using the 26 dB inline preamp that's engaged here, and we're powering it with phantom power on the WA-273 there. And so let's check out how the Guild sounds being captured by the Fen-Tone here. So that's just a quick run through of the foundation of my approach to miking both guitar cabs and acoustic guitars here in the studio, focusing in on the WA-19 and the Fen-Tone Ribbon here from Warm Audio. Thanks again for watching, and if you have any questions or comments about mics, mic techniques, or anything you saw here in the video, please drop a question or comment below, and that can perhaps spur some future topics or future endeavors for this video series here. Thanks again to Warm for sending these mics over, and we'll see you on the next one.